Have you ever heard a sound that broke your life in half? For me, it wasn't a gunshot or a car crash. It was the soft, rehearsed tremor in my wife's voice coming from downstairs. I was lying in our bed, the room spinning from a cocktail of painkillers and fever, my body fighting a brutal case of pneumonia. The doctor had been clear: rest or risk a hospital stay. But through the floorboards, I heard her practicing. She was testing out the lines, the delicate, heartbroken quaver of a woman about to be widowed. "He fought so hard," she murmured, her voice a perfect symphony of sorrow. Was my everything. Pause. "I don't know how I'll go on, but I wasn't dead." I was upstairs, listening to my own eulogy, delivered by the woman who was supposed to be fluffing my pillows. And in that moment, the fever felt like ice in my veins, because I knew this wasn't a drill. She was preparing for a future. She was actively rooting for a future without me. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The first hint wasn't the speech. It was subtler. A few weeks earlier, before the illness took hold, I noticed the small tells. The way Jessica, my wife of 10 years, would angle her phone away from me. The screen's glow, catching the sudden hard set of her jaw. The late-night work emergencies that smelled faintly of a cologne I didn't own. We lived in a sleek high-rise overlooking Lincoln Park in Chicago, a life I'd built from the ground up. I was a partner at an architecture firm. She was a curator at a boutique art gallery. We were a power couple, or so I thought. The strange behavior started small. Credit card receipt from a hotel bar in the Gold Coast on a Tuesday. She was supposedly at a yoga retreat. A hushed phone call she took on the balcony, her back rigid, the icy Chicago wind whipping at her silk robe. When I'd ask, her answers were smooth, polished, and utterly dismissive. "Don't be so insecure, Mark. It's for work." She'd touch my cheek, her fingers cold, her eyes colder. The warmth we once shared had evaporated, replaced by a brittle, manipulative chill. She and her gallery colleague, Davida, man with a smug smile and limp handshakes, seemed to be spending an inordinate amount of time together. They felt untouchable, wrapped in a bubble of inside jokes and shared glances that I was pointedly left out of. The emotional break happened on a rainy Thursday. I'd come home early, hoping to surprise her, holding a bouquet of the same peonies I'd given her on our first date. I found the apartment empty. Quick check of her location, a feature we'd enabled for safety, showed her at the Langham, a luxury hotel on the river. My heart hammered against my ribs. I drove there, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I sat in the valet garage watching the entrance. And then I saw them. Jessica laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting on David's arm. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, possessive kiss under the hotel's glittering awning. It wasn't a peck, it was a confirmation. I felt the world tilt, the air sucked from my lungs. I was humiliated, broken, a ghost watching the life he thought he'd dissolve in the rain-streaked windshield. That was the night the fever started, a physical manifestation of the sickness that had already infected my marriage. Lying in that bed, listening to her widow's speech, something inside me shifted. The heartbreak didn't vanish, but it crystallized. It turned from a fragile, shattered thing into a shard of ice. My grief became strategic. My pain became a blueprint. She wanted me gone. Fine. But I wouldn't be a sad story she told at cocktail parties. I would be the architect of her ruin. For the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the dying husband. I was weak, compliant, barely able to speak, but my mind was a fortress of cold calculation. I hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop who communicated through encrypted texts. Had him install micro cameras in our living room and a GPS tracker on her car. I started a new, private bank account, methodically transferring funds from our joint accounts. Citing fabricated medical prepayments, I contacted my lawyer, a shark named Costello, and laid out the plan. We would let her walk deeper into the trap. Every rehearsed sob, every business trip with David was another nail in her coffin. The PI's reports were brutal, detailed accounts of their meetings at boutique hotels and expensive restaurants, all paid for with my money. I read them with a detached, chilling focus. But the proof was piling up. The trap was set for the annual gallery benefit, Jessica's biggest night of the year. She was the star, the brilliant curator. She stood at the podium, radiant in a backless gown. David standing just off stage, looking at her like a prize he'd already won. Our city's elite were all there, hanging on her every word. She began her speech, thanking the patrons, the artists. Then her voice broke, just as she'd practiced. "I'd also like to dedicate tonight to my husband Mark," she said, a tear tracing a perfect path down her cheek. "He's been so unwell, but his strength inspires me every day." The room filled with sympathetic murmurs. That was my cue. On the massive screen behind her, meant to display art, a new image appeared. It was a still from the PI's camera. Jessica and David, locked in an embrace in our living room, the date and timestamp glowing in the corner. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Jessica froze, her face a mask of horror. The screen changed. A photo of a hotel receipt, then another and another, then a short, silent video clip of them kissing in the Langham's lobby. Her carefully constructed world shattered in high definition. People were pulling out their phones, whispering, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Her boss, the gallery owner, was staring at her, his expression turning to stone. But I wasn't finished. She stood there, paralyzed. A man walked to the stage and handed her a legal envelope. My lawyer had timed the process server perfectly. She was being served with divorce papers right there, in front of everyone she'd spent years trying to impress. The petition cited adultery, and attached, as exhibits, were the investigator's entire file, along with financial statements showing how she'd embezzled funds from our joint accounts for her affair. She was publicly, legally, and socially obliterated. She looked out into the sea of faces, searching, and her eyes found me. I was standing at the back of the room, no longer the dying man from the upstairs bedroom. I was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, my face calm, my expression unreadable. I held her gaze for a long, silent moment, and then I simply turned and walked away, leaving her alone in the ruins. The aftermath was quiet. She lost her job, her friends, her standing. The divorce was swift and brutal. The evidence was ironclad. She got nothing. I sold the apartment, the city, the life we had built. I moved to a small coastal town, a place where the ocean washes everything clean. I don't think about her often, but sometimes, on a quiet night, I can still hear the echo of her voice, practicing her lines for a future that never came. She wanted to be a widow. I simply made her a ghost. The end.